Folks, we're going live.
All right.
Just so you know.
Thank you.
Okay, we are live. Sorry about the delay.
All right, well, welcome back, everyone. Following our recess, I'd like to reconvene our Cook County Board of Appeals and Equalization meeting, and thank you all for attending. To begin with the meeting, we have redone our roll call sheet for Assessor Thompson, and so we have that completed. And now we have some public remarks that were sent in to be read by Administrator Yorkie.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I did get an email from Cindy Gervais-Kuhn, who requested that her email be read in the hearing. And this is addressed to Assessor Thompson, and it says, "Dear Bob Thompson, I'm contacting you regarding the significant increase, quadrupled in value of my parcel in Wildwood Acres 25-055-0212, according to the 2023 valuation notice I received. This notice came as quite a shock to me, and I'm sure many who own property, in Cook County. Not knowing how my property could have raised excessively in value in 1 year's time from $6,300 to $25,300, I reached out to your office for an explanation. Rachel in your office told me she would email me information explaining how the value increased so drastically, but I never received any information from her. Upon calling back, I spoke with Andrew Beavers. His attempt to verbally explain the increase was him repeatedly telling me, quote, that you just do not want to sell, and quote, that this lot would sell in a day if it was on the market. After hearing these statements over and over from Mr. Beavers, I finally questioned him as to what makes him think he knows what I want to do or what it is I am thinking. Let me tell you, your valuation is incorrect and too excessive, and the market confirms it. I put my property up for sale with Timberwolf Realty 6 weeks ago, and there have been no offers or inquiries on my lot, none. I would sell this parcel to anyone who would give me what you suddenly think it is worth, but it doesn't appear that anyone will. Due to my obligations of caring for my disabled brother, James Gervais, who also owns a lot in Wildwood Acres that he will be selling due to these extreme increases, I am unable to take the 6+ hours of time to drive to and attend the County Board of Appeals meeting at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Please accept this letter as my dispute of your 2023 valuation of my parcel 25-055-0212. I request that my dispute letter be read aloud to the County Board of Appeals and that Cook County residents in the Cook County residents in attendance of tomorrow's meeting. And I'd like to add that it is unfortunate that the Assessor's Office is taking such radical steps that will ultimately force generational property owners out of Cook County. Sincerely, Cindy Gervais-Kuhn. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, at this point in time, we're ready to begin with our appeals. Assessor Thompson.
Yes, so this is out of order of the agenda, but should we handle Cindy Gervais-Kuhn first? She is the second to the bottom, number 13 on the updated agenda.
Certainly.
Would that be appropriate?
I think that would be fine.
Maybe. I was just wondering if we had somebody here in person who would like to go before we address.
So the gentleman in the audience is a walk-in. The board in the past has allowed people to walk in. We haven't had a dialogue, so I'm not sure how much information I'll be able to come up with, but if the board wants to.
I believe part of this can be taken care of outside of this meeting as well.
Okay. So yeah, I guess I would leave it up to the board chair to decide which direction we go.
Okay, I would say since we just read the letter, it would be appropriate to go ahead and listen to this appeal.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Chair and Commissioners. So Mrs. Gervais-Kuhn did reach out to our office somewhat early on, before the local Board of Appeals and Equalization. She was listed on the agenda for that, I believe. All of the Gervais were, or a number of Gervais, I should say. I don't know that all were. This particular lot that she's referencing as having put on the market is actually listed almost 20% above our assessment. It's like 18-point-some% above our assessed value. It's been on the market for 36 days now, and my viewpoint on that is a vacant lot can typically take 90 days, maybe even 6 months before it sells at the right price. Obviously, if you price something low, it will sell quicker. If you price something high, it takes a lot longer. With the, suggestion that our assessed value it wouldn't sell for that in the market, being that it's 18% over our assessed value, if the property sold for what it was listed for, that would mean our sales ratio is 80% and we have to raise values again. If it sold for what we have it assessed for, then we did a good job. Rachel did respond to Ms. Gervais in an email. It's attached in the packet that I provided. It's dated Tuesday, May 10th, 12:51. She included attachment of a listing, an MLS listing of a property that went pending. So there was obviously clearly a phone dialogue about what the market's doing. And then this email was very brief in saying, here's what we were discussing on the phone. So it's very brief, and it just says, greetings, Cindy Gervais Craig. Attached is a pending sale of a property. It's directly adjacent, directly one parcel east, and it sold for $35,000. The one that is shown as pending there, that property, taxpayer called and appealed on about a $25,000 valuation. We suggested that they call and talk to a realtor or an appraiser to get an expert third-party opinion. That's exactly what they did. The real estate agent said, I have a buyer lined up. We don't even have to wait. So it went on the market pending immediately. And about 2 hours after receiving that appeal, I called the gentleman and he said, no, I'm not appealing. Somebody bought it for more than that. So the last piece here is there's a list of sales in the Wildwood Acres plat. Every one of those sales is in the plat. Very similar in size. The one exception is the $53,000 sale. That's a bigger lot. It's almost double. And then so you look at those sale prices that occurred over 2020 and 2021. If you apply the time trend on a off-water property, they adjust for 24, 25, 27, 23, and 18,200. So, I understand where her frustration is in the property value quadrupling, but that's a very small. That's one of the cheapest subdivisions in the county that you can buy. So the fluctuations in value can be quite significant.
Are there any questions for Assessor Thompson?
Madam
Commissioner
Chair,
Mills.
Thank you. Can you speak at all to the 2021 valuation of 6,300?
So I know a lot of those parcels were peeled back the last quintile. I think they all got bumped up, and then a lot of them got appealed back then. And some of them more than others, because there are some of them that look like they probably need a wastewater management plan, particularly this property. And after all that flooding we had just a couple weeks ago, there's quite a ravine going through there. You can see it on the MLS listing. But there is a driveway with a culvert or some type of a culvert going through there, and the lot still has some potential to be built on. In fact, being that this thing is on the open market, I considered making an offer with a contract for deed myself.
All right. Other questions for Assessor Thompson? Or any comments? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd make a motion to accept the value at $25,300 for the year 2022.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Svalison. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, Assessor Thompson.
Yeah. Do you want to come up and take the stage? You can grab the microphone. Okay. Okay. And if you do have a concern with the combining those lots, just shoot me an email, or even we can take a copy of that and we can work on it.
I'll get with you.
Okay. Because Rachel, my assistant, can help you.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, thank you. All right, now we'll go to the appeal for Dennis Truian. Property ID number 271610010, Caribou Lake Cabin.
Okay. So these are probably not stacked in the right order.
Yeah.
Dennis Truian and Susan Alcrona. I'm not sure if you guys had a chance to look over their information they provided. They provided 15 comparable sales, or 15 sales, I will say. And then some analysis of average price per square foot, top end price per square foot and the bottom end price per square foot. Essentially, their formula takes all of the sales that they provided, all the sales examples they provided, and establishes the average sale price per square foot of the house, and then used their square footage to multiply by that number and come up with a value. I did respond to the packet when they sent it out, and in response, I got the email that's the very last page. They wanted me to include that page as well with their appeal, essentially saying that they feel that the 15 comparables that they shared provide good information on the status of cabin values on the 3 popular lakes. Their information includes square footage, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, sample photo. The commissioners of the County Board of Appeal and Equalization can use that as they compare with attributes to their 2 cabins. Please make sure they get this information. Basically what I have is I have our property field cards for each of their cabins on Caribou Lake, and then following that is a sales grid example. Both of these properties use 2 of the same sales, and then I think one of them, the 3rd sale, is swapped out to be different, if I remember correctly. But essentially, the comparable sales sheets both support a higher number than what we've got on these properties. These are nice little cute cabins on Caribou Lake. One very similar to the 181 South Caribou Drive, sold for $450,000. That sale, because of the time of the sale, it has a $57,000 time adjustment, so that it's a $500,000 cabin with 956 square feet and no basement. And that's on White Sky. That's a half-acre lot with 105 feet of shoreline. It's a very small lot, but again, it has that utility. Both of these properties, I believe, have larger lots than that sale. This first one at 181 South Caribou has almost an acre of land and 190 feet of shoreline. The 197 South Caribou Drive, that property has 158 feet of shoreline and an acre of land, and that's a little nicer cabin. But my sales grids support the valuations that we have in place. We're using standard adjustments. One of the things that I saw an issue with these 15 sales that were provided, the very first one here, 92 Evergreen Lane, that property was a foreclosure that sold in 2019, and it was partially finished inside. This cabin, if it was listed today, would be over $750,000 without a doubt in my mind. So more than double what it sold for in 2019. You know, and it kind of is a similar story. Like this next one is a very big house sold in 2019. Obviously, you have a diminishing return. When you get bigger, the price per square foot goes down. This one actually is probably the best sale that they provided, and it's in my comp grid. This one sold for $407 a square foot. So you can kind of see this is a more recent sale. It's in 2020. And it's much more similar to, it's particularly the one cabin that they have at 197 South Caribou. This has a basement. It's similar in size, similar in quality. So that's a very good comparable that they provided. There's another one on Sawmill Lane. It's a larger house, lower price per square foot, and again, a 2019 sale. And then this one here at 174 White Sky is probably the best comparable they have to their first property on 181 South Caribou. So this sold for $469 a square foot. So when you whittle it down to the 2 best comparables, and really, you know, you want 3 sales to really kind of tell you where things are at. You want one bigger and one smaller, one older and one newer. All those things you want to bracket your property, subject property. But it's clearly suggesting that those are going for about 400 plus a square foot. This next one is in an association. They have common element shoreline, and it's in a small community where you have really close neighbors. It used to be a resort. And then another big, large house. So basically what I've done is I've taken the best sales in my grid and used those for comparison using paired sales analysis and adjusting for differences in the buildings.
All right. Any questions for Assessor Thompson?
So I would like to point out, Mrs. Chair, that the property number 2, we are recommending a change in valuation to 535.7 from the originally proposed 656.9. We've corrected some land attributes on that property, so there was a reduction on that one.
So I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, with the comparables that Assessor Thompson provided, I'm comfortable making the motion to have the assessed value at $441,800 for property 1 for 2022. And then also that reduction for property number 2, $535,700 for 2022.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. Is there support? Thank you, Commissioner Storley. We have a motion and support. Further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. We have on our list Judith Olsen, property ID 51020210, Cascade Beach Road Cabin.
All right, so Judith Olsen is my favorite appealer of the year. She won the Appealer of the Year award. She is a very sweet little old lady. I actually met her last year when she appealed. I believe she's in her 90s. And she prepared all of this information on her own, and I'm quite impressed. However, there are some flaws in her analysis. So we are recommending a reduction to the valuation from the originally proposed. It originally came in at $603,100, and we're recommending a reduction down to $559,900. This is a Cascade Beach Road house. It's very small lot. It's old, but it's been maintained to the point where it's still functional. It's not, I wouldn't call it a tear down. Somebody would buy it and enjoy it the way it sits, but it could use some work. The septic system and well appear that they've been maintained. The well cap looks somewhat new. And there was hay covering over the water lines and stuff. So somebody's been taking care of the property, and it's not just deteriorating away. I'm not sure that I can read through all of Mrs. Olsen's analysis, but we can definitely skim through it. I know you guys had a chance to kind of review this a little bit. She's describing her cabin. It's a 1963 built. It was her parents' retirement home. She has a lot of memories, and one important fact that she's pointing out is that there's been no improvements to the original cabin since it was built, other than a small extension of the main bedroom in 1970 and a ramp to the door on the driveway side in the 1990s, as both of them were and are partially disabled. She's talking about the amount of increase over the last couple of years in the assessment. This year, the initially proposed increase was 53.15%. That's not uncommon on Cascade Beach Road or West End Lakeshore. So she used our guidelines of examining sold properties between October 1st, 2020 and January 30th, 2022. I want to hire Judy in my office because she's really good at this. So, she found some sales, and she's gone and done some analysis of these. So she does provide pictures and describes the differences in the kitchen. The pictures of the kitchens are from MLS listings, and they, really do look nice. The photo that we have of Miss Olsen's property isn't a professionally taken photo. But the analysis uses these for sales on Cascade Beach Road. And she also describes differences in the square footage of these sales. She provides some analysis of the bathrooms and explains that her property has no shower, it's just a bathtub. So, I do really give her a lot of credit for putting together a very detailed appeal. She talks about the exterior, and, these properties that have sold have these nice decks that sit near the lake. So there's some photos of that, and then there's a kind of a photo of the backside, the lake side of her property there. There are additional photos of her property in our assessment record. So finally, she has put together some graphs or some grids here, and she's looking at these sales. The one she's showing that it has more lake shore, and it sold in November of 2020 for $584. The next one, 3876 Cascade Beach Road, sold in September of 21 for $810,000. This next one on 4074 Cascade Beach Road sold in October of 2020 for $698,500. And then this last one is her home. It had a 53% increase. So she's showing that she had a larger increase and that she's got less front footage than these homes. The problem is that there's no bracketing. There's nothing on the bottom side to say here's where you have a floor and a ceiling. And all of these would be considered superior properties, and therefore they all have much higher sale prices than even what we had originally assessed her at of $603,100. So we did do a reduction based on the lot size. We applied a small reduction, and also, looking at the building and what it's lacking there, and updates and improvements. So she also has some other concerns that she discussed. The current interest rates are rising. The economy, she feels a national recession within the near future is genuinely possible. And she feels that the current home sale prices and property assessments could become extremely overinflated and excessive. She did provide some information contact for having further discussion. So that was, the stuff she put together was certainly, it was certainly the right stuff to put together, but it didn't tell a story that she was overvalued. It just showed that bigger properties sell for more. With the proposed reduction that we're proposing, I feel it's well supported. I don't know if you've looked at the photos that we have in our assessment record. There's a very similar sale, but it is actually from 2016, and it sold for $372,000. This house has been completely leveled to the ground and rebuilt. It's a really nice vacation rental now. It's the very first house on Cascade Beach Road. But you can see from the photo, when this thing sold in 2016, it was just like Mrs. Olsen's property. I feel like the same builder built it. It even has the same little overhang over the exit door. So, they paid $372,000. They did a septic tank. They completely gutted the house, and we've had a lot of market appreciation since 2016. But I think this kind of shows, with the market increases, it's worth more than $400,000. Judy's letter said she's thinking it should be assessed in the $400,000 range. So, my recommendation after doing the sales grid is that the $559,900 is supported.
Thank you so much. Do you have any questions or discussion?
Yeah,
Commissioner
I do.
Hawkins.
This is another one I struggle with because I get Cascade Beach Road. Everybody wants it. They're willing to pay ridiculous amounts of money. But back if you go from 2019 and I'm 21, as far as what the land was valued versus what the building was valued at, and why was there such a difference? What happened in there?
So what I think, and I've seen this in a lot of areas of the county, when adjustments were being made to fix the sales ratio study or to prepare for the end of the year, the adjustments that they were doing were primarily going into the land and not so much into the buildings. So what ends up happening is at some point your land is all overvalued and you have to correct it. That's what we were doing in the West End a couple of years ago when we had reductions in the land values. And when you reduce the land values, now your improved properties are under-assessed because the increases they were trying to apply to correct the ratio were in the wrong area. It should have probably been in the buildings when it was in the land. So in this case, you can see, well, it looks like the land went up, down, and then up again between 19, 20, 21, and 22. That's all trying to get the right balance, getting that the land is valued right so that vacant lots are selling for what they're assessed at, and the improved ones are selling for what they're assessed at. And sometimes you're having to shift value all over the place. You can see the value of the building increased every assessment. And that's where we were trying to get some of the value into the right place. So it's a matter of correcting the assessment when you're seeing those shifts back and forth, to getting things balanced out to where you want them. You know, we switched everything to a different land table in 2021 in the greater Grand Marais area. So there's a lot of different things coming into play. The last time these properties were assessed was 2 assessors ago. Todd didn't do this area in his quintile. And so now we're talking 3 assessors between these property inspections. And it's just really a matter of everyone implementing what they thought was the way to do it. So.
Good question. Very helpful. Other questions? I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll make the motion to accept the reduced valuation of $559,900.
Thank you, Commissioner Swanson.
This portion.
Is there support?
I'll support.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley. We have a motion and support. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Karen McCullough.
Yes. Right on top. All right, Karen McCullough, she contacted us early on, she called on her own. And I had a conversation with her, talked about some of the sales on Cascade Beach Road. And she, I think a couple weeks later, just contacted an attorney. She didn't call back. So I got a letter from Mr. Burns' assistant, and, you know, it provided a market analysis from a realtor. And I looked it over. I was actually out doing some seminars and some classes when this came, but I did have a couple of conversations with Mr. Burns about the market analysis the realtor did. There are no adjustments for time, and there were just a lot of things that were not the same way that we practice as appraisers. So, you know, real estate agents aren't held to the same standard as appraisers. They have a little more freedom with how they can put together a market analysis. So I looked it over, and I responded to Bill and said that I didn't feel like it was a good reflection of Karen McCullough's property. And, you know, I actually told Bill that I thought it was a misleading market analysis, that, you know, if a person truly doesn't understand the real estate market, this would be misleading to them, because it doesn't account for standard practices, adjusting for market conditions and things like that. So, Karen McCullough, I'm proposing no change, but presenting her appeal, and then providing my rationale for supporting the valuation. Mr. Burns describes our conversation. He said that, you know, Bob Thompson has advised me that he feels that the Realtor's report is incomplete or potentially misleading in several aspects, including the failure to time adjust comparables. To me, that's the biggest misrepresentation. So, citing a property in Schroeder, that one also, that was used as a comparable. It's not the same market as Cascade Beach Road. It's a completely different property. It's much bigger. And the house that's on it is actually going to be tore down, according to the person who bought it. They paid $500,000 for that property for the land down in Schroeder, and they plan to tear that house down. So Bill says here, you know, after talking extensively with Lisa, she concedes that to the limited extent with respect to the property in Schroeder, but she thinks that with how few sales there are, they should look at all sales. I disagree. We've had a record number of sales in Cook County and a lot of lakeshore sales. I used 3 of the sales in her market analysis, and using standard adjustments, well-supported value. It's actually low according to my sales grid. So, you know, between all of the back and forth, I did talk to Bill Burns again, and Mr. Burns advised me that, you know, he was representing his client and that he would be submitting the appeal to the county board. And I said to Bill, I said, you know, the value is not way off. It's not one of those things that would end up in tax court, it's just not worth it. And he said, I 100% agree. And I said, well, Bill, with the misleading market analysis, don't you think it would be wise to advise your client that this market analysis is not using the same methodology as an appraiser would, and that this probably isn't worth pursuing? But, you know, nonetheless, they decided they would submit a written appeal, and what they're asking for is an adjustment to 643. So our current valuation is at 7094. And like I said, I used 3 of the sales in the Realtor's analysis and just did appropriate adjustments, and came up with a value range of 750 to 776. There were 2 sales on Cascade Beach Road at 800,000, and I don't think either one of them are as desirable as Mrs. McCullough's.
All right. Do we have any questions or comments about the property at 24 Black Point Boulevard? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd make a motion to set the valuation at $709,400 for the year 2022, based on the market comparisons provided by Assessor Thompson.
All right, thank you so much, Commissioner Mills. Is there support? Support. Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, next is Judy Larman.
So this is a property, it's actually just outside of the city limits, but I still would consider it within the city. It's the same driveway shares with the mini storage at the top of the hill just beyond the cemetery. There's a little log cabin back there, if you can see the photos that I have on the assessment record. It's a really unique little property back there. It's one of those ones that you could have it valued at 200,000 and they list it for almost $500,000. And somebody might say, oh, well, that's where I want to have my coffee shop or some, you know, art studio. It's right up above the rec park, and, you know, you get a view of Lake Superior. It's walking distance to town. It's a very old cabin. There's not plumbing or anything like that. So, you know, after a couple of conversations with Judy, her request in her email, which is the last page, or in her letter she sent, was that it just get reduced to the prior year value. And last year, the value went up 105%. So looking at that, I think that this was one of those properties that they got their adjustment last year that a lot of people saw this year. And I'm okay with going to that 2021 assessment value. So it's a reduction from our originally proposed valuation.
All right, so we're talking about a reduction to 195.5. Any questions or discussion? Nice little piece of property.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to set the valuation at $195,500 for the year 2022.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Svallesen. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion?
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Just a step behind here. Is there city and sewer, water and sewer that goes to?
It's not hooked up. I don't know how far away it would be. I don't imagine that the storage building has any, so it might be a ways away. We do account for that in our assessment.
Oh, okay, that's what I'm,
Yeah, I don't think it's an option there.
yeah, I don't think it is. So that's why I'm wondering, is there
Yeah.
room here for a septic if you wanted to do
Oh,
something
yeah,
different?
I would imagine so. It's got quite a bit of land there. It's got 4.92 acres. And it is outside of the city limits, so it's to the county's ordinances.
Okay, I just want to make
It's a
sure
really
know
nice
that's
piece of
good.
property.
Any other questions or discussion? Do I hear a motion?
Been done.
Done in second.
Oh, yeah, I interrupted, sorry.
Yep.
Oh, further
No, that's
discussion,
right.
that's-
I didn't make my check mark. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Nicole Schrader.
Okay, so this one is also Marcia Aggie.
Yep.
Mrs. Schreiber is also in the Croftville Row, right?
Yep.
Correct.
Yep. Yep.
Yep.
One of the 3 owners? I thought there was 10.
There's 10 owners, but in the.
Oh, 3, yeah, there's 3 owners of this particular property. So, yeah, it is in the Croftville Row. Very similar situation to Mrs. Dry, with the concern on the assessed valuations. So I'm curious if, you know, if the whole common element issue would resolve this one as well. We did the same thing as Carolyn Dry on this one, where we put together an analysis of recent sales in our grid, and we never really got to this with Miss Dry, but in our grid, we did use 2 HOA sales, one being the Carolyn Dry property, and the other one being another HOA, where they have bigger buildings, but we did adjust for a square footage difference. And then the only property that actually truly owns Lakeshore outside of the common elements, we did adjust for a front foot value. So in both the Miss Dry situation and this one, I feel like what it is the common element valuation and getting taxed on that. It is like a double whammy. I mean, it's like they're paying the tax valuation of their individual cabin and what they could sell it for, and then there's also this outside value that I can't just add into theirs.
Lakeshore value.
Yep. So there is a solution. It's just, you know, essentially that HOA needs to get together and say, apportion those expenses to the unit owners. We can't value them above what they can sell them for.
Precisely. All right. Any questions? Any discussion?
Yeah, Madam Chair, it sounded like a very similar
Yeah. I would
situation
agree.
here, which is unique and uncomfortable.
I hope it can be resolved through the HOA. Well, I would make a motion to accept the land value at 341.1, which is the 2022 recommendation. Is there some? Thank you, Commissioner Swallowson. Any further discussion?
And Madam Chair, just to be clear, you said land value, but it's the property value?
Property value, thank you. Appreciate that. Other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right. We have,
Cindy, we've done.
yep. So do we want to do the Signal Hill Trust?
Yeah.
Dig into that?
This one could get lengthy, I don't know.
Attorney Hickens anxious to get to this. I can tell.
All right, so the Signal Hill Trust, this is 2 properties, one on Lake Superior. The Lake Superior property is 1,550 feet of lakeshore. They have 24.39 acres, a little bit of that is on the other side of the highway. And then there's a second parcel, it was a 40, but the highway came through and claimed some of it, so it's 35.15 acres. The conservation easement, I was able to briefly look at it. This was sent over 3 hours before our 1 o'clock meeting this earlier today. I have had conversations with the attorney at Mrs. Eklund, and she's very reasonable. She had a lot of time for me for an attorney, I can tell you that much. And she definitely didn't sound like she was, you know, just hard charging, challenging this value. She was really trying to get down to what is this thing worth with the conservation easement. So it sounds to me like they were in the process of trying to locate an appraiser willing to do this appraisal. They had spoke to John Vegan, who, you know, is a very well-renowned appraiser, but unfortunately, he's kind of retired, at least semi-retired from what I understand. And he wasn't willing to or able to do the appraisal. So they contacted the Minnesota Land Trust, and I believe the last I heard, they were recommended an appraiser from the Land Trust. So this is one that we are proposing a reduction from the original. We originally sent over, between the two parcels, it was over $2 million. And what we realized is that most of our conservation easements in Cook County, there's been a 20% reduction applied to the land value. I'm not sure where that adjustment came from, how it was extracted, but that's what's on all the other conservation easements. And on this property, it was missing on a couple of the tiers of the lake shore. So when we realized that, we said, hey, we'll apply the 20% discount on all of it instead of just the fourth tier. And that brings it down to this new number. I don't have the total valuation here.
1,745,900.
Yeah. 1,745,900 between the two parcels. So essentially, you know, it dropped the value of both the land parcels. And, you know, when I initially talked to them, they said, well, yes, we'll accept that. We will wait and see what our appraiser says. And it didn't sound like they were going to come to the county board. So until 11 o'clock, when we got the phone call that this packet of information with the easement and the old appraisal was coming over, I didn't think we were going to be processing this appeal today. So this letter I typed up just since 11 a.m., between 11 and 1, and just trying to give a breakdown of why we felt like it wasn't necessary to do any more adjusting. Essentially, there's an adjacent property that recently sold, the $2.7 million sale. I talked to the real estate agent who represented the buyer on that one, and they said that they plan on enrolling it in a conservation easement. So the buyer of a property who wants to put it in a conservation easement was the highest bidder of that property, or the only one willing to pay that amount of money. So what that tells me is that if the Dixon, the Signal Hill Trust property, was on the market with a conservation easement, they would have looked at that as a substitute property. It's got a lot of frontage, it's got a building site, they're willing to pay a lot of money. Conservationists, we had the discussion in my office, there's no entry-level conservation easement. I won't be getting a conservation easement anytime soon. Conservationists typically have a lot of purchasing power, well-funded, and in fact, these days, we're working with a gentleman who's enrolling some property in a conservation easement. He's getting compensated. They're paying him for the rights that they're taking over. There is a state statute that says the assessment should not be reduced if the conservation easement was entered into after 2013. So there was obviously some concern that people were enrolling in conservation easements just to reduce their property taxes. And these properties would have never been changed anyway. They just want these very large, 1,000-foot plus shoreline. We dealt with a couple of them today, where if they truly don't want it ever developed, that's what they're willing to put it in a conservation easement and get some compensation for it. Back when this one was drafted, they may not have been compensating. There's been a lot of money flowing into the Minnesota Land Trust and organizations like that, where they now can compensate people to acquire these conservation easements. We also have an example of a sale. This is east of town, a 900-foot property with Lake Superior shoreline, 21 acres. That sold for $649, and that adjusted sale price is $750. I think it may have sold a little bit less than it would have because it doesn't have that development potential, but it's still sold for a premium. That cabin is off-grid. There's no indoor plumbing. There's no electricity. I think they have some solar panels, but it's a very rustic cabin. So essentially, they paid $750,000 for that large lot with a rustic cabin. And all of the analysis I was doing made me think, this property is worth every bit that it would be without the conservation easement. We don't see a lot of developers buying large parcels and subdividing them out. It was happening more frequently back in 2008 and 9 and the early mid-early 2000s, but it's just not happening anymore. But you still have some very powerful buyers in the market paying top dollar for unique properties. That sale up on Caribou Lake, that was a number of years ago for $500,000. That one doesn't have a conservation easement, but they bought it and they haven't subdivided it. They're just using it like it would be as a cabin on a very quiet lake with not a lot of traffic and no other neighbors. So, you know, I definitely take a lot of concern when there's an attorney involved and, you know, they're pursuing an appraisal. But what's unfortunate is that after this meeting, we can't adjust this value if an appraisal comes in and it's a good appraisal that says, hey, it should probably be a little lower, then it might result in a tax court petition. So it's certainly something that I'm glad Attorney Hicken could have joined us and give her thoughts on it. At the end of the day, you know, a petition, especially when you're being represented, can be expensive. The petition itself is not. It's like $300. But if they had good evidence and came forth with a petition, you know, Molly and I would have to sit and discuss, is this worth pursuing, or is this something we're going to make an adjustment? You know, that these are the situations we can get ourselves into. I did talk to Greg in Lake County earlier today. They just settled a tax court petition on a conservation easement. In that case, they had a bunch of parcels that were individually divided out, but the conservation easement blanketed all of them. So they just combined them, and he said they didn't do any reductions. They value them the same way they would any other property, and that resolved that tax court petition. So, you know, it's tough. It sounds to me like they did just get another petition on a conservation easement. And Greg said, we don't reduce values for conservation easements. There's not evidence to say that it affects the value. And based on what I saw, I feel the same way. In addition, we are reducing it 20% over what it would be without it, the land value. So the last piece that's kind of relevant is in this conservation easement. This one appears to have more freedom in building and developing. They've sectioned off what looks like maybe a little less than 2/3, to be conservative. 2/3 of that parcel on the shoreline side has the availability for development. It's written out in the easement. I was reading, it says they can build 2 additional buildings. Obviously, this easement was written back in '97. And it does say that any of the buildings can be increased by 25%. They spell out very clearly what can and can't be done in these conservation easements. And typically what I know they do is, in most cases, the owner enrolling in this easement is saying, we want a great place for our cabin and we never want it to change. So, you know, they'll section off this envelope of the property and say, we can do what we want to do, otherwise we're not going to put it in a conservation easement. And typically the conservation easement obliges. And I'm aware of one up on McFarland Lake where they have 2 build site envelopes separately. They're not adjoined. There's one out on Caribou Lake where they have a very similar, they describe the area that it can be built on, 25% increase to the size of the buildings. And the one, it specifically says that, you know, the 1930 characteristic must be preserved. So you can rebuild a brand new house, but it has to be built in 1930 style, craftsman or something style. And then it said anything outside of the main cabin could be built, and I don't remember what the restrictions were on size or whatever, but, you know, these conservation easements, there are buyers out there for them, and they're conservationists.
Is there a way to rescind a conservation easement?
I think you can, but it's very costly. It wouldn't be worth it.
It might be with, the terms of that would be within the easement itself?
It might be. Molly, are you familiar with that?
I mean, typically they run with the land and there is, can I see the packet? I haven't seen these materials until I sat down today. I don't have a copy, so I just was able to look through them really briefly.
So I did take a class with the Minnesota Land Trust once, and it was actually very interesting. I do recall they discussed, you know, if somebody wants to modify their easement language and add another build site, it's super costly. Like, you're basically buying an expensive property back. And same with if you wanted to get out of the conservation easement, I think you can certainly buy it out. So you're probably gonna pay 3 times what you got, or, you know, maybe even more. It might not even be worth it in the end. Can't remember if it was Mr. Wano, he was describing that there was going to be a meeting with the Minnesota Land Trust in town, and I'm definitely gonna try and attend that.
I have a question, Madam Chair. So the proposed assessed value is 1.740. Is that what you're proposed, or is that with a 20% reduction, or what?
That was with the reductions that we proposed. So that's on the 2 parcels combined with the land value reduction.
And it sounds like the land value reduction is questionable to me.
You know, it is. The one thing that I was okay with is that it makes it consistent with the other conservation easements in Cook County.
Yeah, I think you'd have to explain why you didn't apply it if that's what you've consistently done.
That's why that's exactly why it came out, and when I noticed it, I called Mrs. Eklund right away and said, hey, we're gonna, you know, put this discount on these first 3 tiers of shoreline and the back acreage, and this is the number it came out to. Is this something that they would be okay with? I mean, it's a pretty significant reduction from that originally proposed number. So, you know, I'm hoping that they get an appraisal and I don't ever hear from them again. What's interesting is if you actually look at that 1997 appraisal, I thought they said the land, or that the value was 1.5 million, wasn't it? Without the conservation easement? Let me see if I can find that page again.
1.3?
But if it was was it 1.5 or?
1.35.
1.35. So, I mean, if it was that much in 97, what was it in 08? I would think from 97 to 08, it would have doubled in value, and today it's probably worth just as much. I mean, I don't know that they could get $3 million for that property, but.
It's a lot of shoreline. That's just why I was questioning that 20% reduction, but it sounds like we need to stick with that. But I'm wondering, to be fair to all the other taxpayers in Cook County, if that should not be the case, and how do we go about adjusting all of the conservation easements to not have that 20% reduction?
I think it's worth a lot of exploring.
A lot of legwork.
I think it's worth exploring to see, you know, we could do at least one analysis. I have one sale with a conservation easement. If I found a very similar property that sold and it didn't have a conservation easement, that's how I extract how that conservation easement impacted the value.
Yeah.
It's in Cook County, it's difficult to find a very similar sale. You know, you could take a 40 with a conservation easement and find a 40 without one, and boom, it's easy. But is that gonna play out in a lakeshore property? I don't think so.
Right.
But we do have one sale, and when I told Greg from Lake County about that sale, he was very happy to hear about it. He was also very happy or interested to hear about the I think it's 2.6, I have 2.7 there. $2.6 million sale that is being enrolled into a conservation easement from what we were told. I mean, that's telling you that a conservationist just paid nearly $3 million for a property for that purpose.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, if we need to make a policy that we don't discount
Yeah.
conservation easements.
So I can't make a policy about that. I mean, basically an assessor is held to value at market value.
Right.
And that's the policy we gotta stick to. If the data said it doesn't affect the market value, then I wouldn't be adjusting them. I would find them all in the system, and I would take those adjustments off.
But what I'm hearing you say is you would have to take the time to be able to go through all of those and.
Yeah, pulling all the discounts off of the conservation easements could end really well. But yeah, I mean, if it's supported in the data that these don't affect market value anymore, I mean, maybe at one point in time they did. People were hesitant to buy a conservation easement property, but there's a lot of interest in conservation these days, and You know, one thing that I had a discussion, because like I said, when this came up, well, actually it was the Bill Burns one, but I was out at my convention with a lot of the assessors from around the state and the Department of Revenue, and we had a brief conversation about this. That's how I found out Lake County had a petition. And they said that in these grids, if you're comparing properties that sold, so say they paid 2.6 million and now they're getting reimbursed $500,000 for a conservation easement, what was the sale price of that property? Because they knew going in that they would get compensated for that easement, so they're willing to pay more. And, you know, to the extent of that, that might affect the market valuation. It might affect what someone's willing to pay if they know they're getting money back in their pocket. Or is it like, you know, is it like personal property where, you know, you buy this property, say you were to buy it for 2 million, now you're buying it for 2 million and you're getting $500,000 back. So I don't know. It's definitely a very interesting topic where there's not a lot of data out there on it. I think we'll get more data as time goes on. We're working with a taxpayer on a potential land donation that would be enrolled in a conservation easement, and I think we'll learn some in that process too.
Do you know offhand how many conservation easements are in Cook County?
There's at least 5 that I can think of.
Last year, I think we had one at the Board of Appeals. It seems like they come with a lawyer.
They do. Yeah, they come with a lawyer. Like I said, I think people who are interested in conservation easements aren't entry level. They're not me. Yeah, so it's kind of just fizzled out, I think, on that one we had up on McFarland. It might have been a year or 2 ago, but that was one on McFarland. I know of 2 on Caribou Lake, and I know of 2 on Lake Superior. There's definitely a lot more. Rachel, can you think of any more?
Yes, but I don't know where.
Yeah, there's definitely quite a few in Cook County. The Michael Freed properties, you remember that big land donation was like 2,200 acres that I think they gave him like $2 million for it or something. They'd never filed for exemption. They're a nonprofit. They could have filed exemption on those, but they made it clear to us when the donation happened that they didn't intend to do that. But that's a perfect example, you know, somebody taking very valuable lakeshore real estate and just saying, it's more important to me. The financial doesn't matter, that the conservation was more important.
And I appreciate that. I just, like I said, try to be as fair to all the taxpayers of Cook County. And it sounds to me at times there can be questionable motives when you're talking about the building envelopes or whatever. But, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to set the valuation at $1,745,887. For 2022.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Svallesen. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? Brady?
Oh, I'm just curious about the number underneath.
Yeah, the 41-2.
The 41,200. Is that part of it?
Was that not in that total?
I think we need to have 2 motions.
It's
Oh.
Same parcel number.
Thank
but
you.
It just doesn't seem to be included.
Would you like to amend your motion?
I think so. That makes it then 1,786,000. No, 87. Thank you, $1,100.
And he'll support the amendment. Great. Thank you, Commissioner Svallesen. We have a motion and support. Further discussion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right. We're getting down there. Assessor Thompson, what would you like to do next?
Well, I think, so we had the appointment that didn't show up, which is Nagler, right?
Correct. Yep.
And then we did have this late appeal that came in. They put this together after the agenda was put together.
Correct.
So, why don't we do Floyd Nagler first?
All right. So this is for 4078 Cascade Beach Road, an 864 square foot house with a gazebo, a shed, and 1.78 acres of land and almost 100 feet of Lake Superior shoreline. Assessor Thompson.
Yes, so we just described, it's a 65% increase, was pretty typical of Lake Shore, especially Cascade Beach Road. In this case, Mr. Nagler reached out to Mitch Travis after talking to us, and, Mitch Travis gave a map overlay of what he believes would be the wetlands on the property. Dominated by white cedar, a rare natural plant. There's some description there by Mitch Travis, and then on the next page is the map of where those wet areas, wetlands, those cedar areas, cedar swamp areas are. When I look at this, immediately what I think is the functional utility of this property is not impacted to the extent that he couldn't build a cabin and have a seasonal Lake Superior cabin. If there was no structure on it and somebody was telling him he could not build because of wetlands, that impacts the value. But, clearly we have a structure on this property. It's existed actually for a number of years. The cabin was built in 1940, so that building envelope is preserved for, future rebuilding within the footprint. It to me seems like it's just one of those clear-cut cases where, these small seasonal cabins are being impacted by valuations, or by sales, and valuations are increasing. $511,000 for a Cascade Beach Road cabin seems, quite low. This is kind of similar to Mrs. Olsen's property.
Yep.
Honestly, I don't know if this one's as nice as Mrs. Olsen's, and it reflects in the assessment is quite a bit lower, $40-some thousand lower.
Any questions for Assessor Thompson? Commissioner Hawkins.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand as far as the wetlands go. I appreciated the map from Mitch. But that's, when I was thinking about both of these, the other one on the lake, which lake was that? With all the wetlands supposedly there.
Mr. Nelson.
That's right there. And so we're saying wetlands just don't matter to the sale price of a property. That's what I'm hearing?
No, they do. If there's a challenge with development, it certainly can impact the value. One thing, the conversation I had with Neva about things like this and setbacks in really small lots, if you have a half-acre lot, it's a substandard lot in a lot of cases, was that if you were, if you're dealing with a vacant piece of land and you want to build something, you have to ask for a variance. Wetlands, definitely there are challenges with it, but I definitely, they affect value, but they definitely don't just make it, they don't obliterate the value. In this situation, I would say, yeah, maybe there's no spot for a garage, but for 70-plus years, this property has sat without a garage. 80-plus years, this property has not had a garage, and it's still been enjoyed as a Lake Superior cabin. That's its utility. We did have a property, interestingly enough, in town, right across from the jail. And it's the parcel that they just built that house on from the Hamilton Habitat. Yep. That property was valued at $100 when it sold for $76,000. Someone had brought a wetland delineation in and said that this whole property is unbuildable. I've been paying taxes on it all these years. The value was lowered by the assessor to $100, and 2 years later it sold for $76,000. And the Department of Revenue called and talked to me about that one and said, how did this property get valued at $100? Was it an error? Do you need to correct it? And I said, no, it was intentionally done. It was based off of a wetland delineation that said the entire property was a wetland. What ended up happening is they bought very expensive wetland credits. So you preserve wetlands in another area, you pay a financial, you buy those credits, and then you can develop wetland credits elsewhere. So there is a process. In a situation like this, I really don't think it affects the value. I mean, if this property didn't have wetlands and it had a nice big house and a garage, it would be valued at $900,000. It's valued for a small cabin on Cascade Beach Road. With everything that is present on the property accounted for in the assessment. You know, we typically go over these with property owners and, you know, we say, do you have a house? Do you have a gazebo, a shed? You've got a site value, which is, you know, water system and a septic system or a holding tank. So we go over all that information, and as long as everything's correct, it's assumed that the assessment is working the way it should. You inventory what everyone has, you enter it into the system as an inventory, and then the sales set the values of the units. That's the most simple form of describing the assessment process.
All right. Do we have any discussion or questions? For 4078 Cascade Beach Road. Not, I'd entertain a motion.
I will make the motion to accept the valuation of $511,100 for the 2022 assessment for this property.
Thank you, Commissioner Svallesen. Is there support? Thank you, Commissioner Storley. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right. So we are down to the Walter J. Schmidt property at 4184 Cascade Beach Road. Property that is on a popular road tonight.
Indeed.
All right. Assessor Thompson.
All right, so this one is another one that, I'm not sure if they appealed earlier on or if it was just a late appeal altogether, but we didn't really put this one together until the last minute. 4184 Cascade Beach Road, 708 square foot house, 252 square foot cabin, so 2 structures on the property, 0.54 acres with 119 feet of shoreline. So again, we're kind of starting off saying that this is a small lot, small cabin, and looks like our assessed value is at 527.7. So we had Judith Olsen at 559.9, and we had the last one at 511. It kind of goes to show that things are being done somewhat consistently, you know. These are pretty similar properties, not a lot of differences. And I do truly feel like the one that was valued the lowest was probably the least desirable. This one's probably right in the middle of Judith Olsen and the other one. So we do have a comp grid put together. We've got our assessor's photos. It looks like it's pretty well maintained. I mean, sometimes photos are deceiving, but you know, nice coat of paint on it for sure. There is a CRV here. 4640 Cascade Beach Road. And it looks like that CRV is a $690,000 sale. Okay, so I recall why this was in there. I attached the field card for that other one that sold for $690,000. And you can see it's got a lot of similar characteristics. It does definitely have a big carriage garage on that property, and the cabins are quite nice, but you know, this is a cabin, a guest cabin, and then a garage, $690,000. This property has 0.72 acres, or no wait, it's got more than that. Oh, 0.72. It's got 0.72 acres, and it's got 131 feet of shoreline, so this is a very small lot. You know, I heard a lot of people this year talk about, you know, their lot is very small, and it's very limited and restricted. In fact, Mr. Olsen, Jeffrey Olsen from up the trail on Clearwater Lake was very adamant that he was restricted in what he could ever do. There was a property listing the other day for $1 million, and that's on a 1 acre lot on the Old Shore Road. 1.3 million, I think, on a 1 acre lot on Lake Superior. So,
How much is that per acre?
well, if you take the improvement value out, see, these are a lot of things that missteps that sometimes are taken in a property valuation. You know, you could say, what's the square foot value of that, or what's the acreage value of that, but you've got a huge building on there, so none of them are really defined. But yeah, I mean, small properties, variances are an option. Neva told me that if you're asking for a variance because you have a small envelope, you're more likely to get it than if you're asking for a variance because you want your sauna by the water.
Right. That makes sense.
Any other questions for Auditor Thompson? Assessor Thompson? Oh, it's getting late. All right, hearing or seeing none, is there a motion?
I will make the motion to approve the evaluation provided for $527,700
I'll
for this
second.
property for 2022.
All right.
Good to know
Thank
you're
you,
here.
Auditor Powers. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
So we just have one last order of business, and this is the unchallenged assessor recommendations. You guys can make one motion or go through them one by one. The Signal Hill Trust is on here, but the recommendation is the exact same as what we had on the motion earlier, so I don't know if we need to cross those out of the list, or if it doesn't matter.
I would recommend we just amend the list to remove those two.
We've already dealt with them.
So with that amendment, is there a motion?
So moved, Madam Chair, to approve the listed assessor recommendation changes for 2022.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Mills. Is there support? Support. Thank you, Commissioner Storley. We have a motion and support. Any further questions, discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We have completed our business. Commissioner Mills.
Madam Chair, I just want us all to take a moment and think about where our heads are at. And then recognize that both Rachel and Bob are there almost all the time, every day. Really difficult work, really appreciate your thoroughness and your analytical skills and your personal skills, just dealing with everyone's concerns. It's a job well done and very difficult. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys all. I appreciate all the time we spent here today and the analysis too. There certainly were some interesting calls. Some not as pleasant as others. You're right, we did deal with basically this for the last 2 months. I'm excited to take a little bit of time off. I'm going to the Easement wedding this weekend, so I'll probably be taking off first thing in the morning, enjoying Lake Minnetonka tomorrow.
Oh,
So, well, I'm excited to be through this process, but it's never ending. I will be back next week just to kind of get the ball rolling on the quintile, and we've got some tax work stuff to prep for, and we got to keep things moving.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for all your hard work, and thanks to the rest of your team who aren't here this evening. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Swallow.
So just a point of order, we are scheduled for a 4-hour meeting tomorrow. Will we be conducting that 4-hour meeting tomorrow?
I think if you reference that page I had made the highlights on,
Right.
we have unfilled time slots. So I don't know technically what the rules of order are when you publish a meeting, but we require an appointment and we don't have appointments. So we have covered the 1-hour slot that everybody was notified on their valuation notice. I think that because we've scheduled these meetings and we have unfilled time slots, we can adjourn according to that manual.
All right.
That's what I wanted to validate. I'm certainly
Yeah.
willing to come in tomorrow if we needed to.
We checked.
Oh, good.
It's highlighted. All right, great.
not
Well,
only is it what Commissioner Swelson wanted to validate, it's what I wanted to hear.
Well, that's correct, and I wanted anyone that was listening to
know.
also,
Yeah.
if we're not going to have that meeting, to recognize that.
We have to sit here for 4 hours.
but we do officially need a motion to adjourn. So is there a motion?
Madam Chair, it's tradition that
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Auditor Powers. Is there a second?
Well, for Brady.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you all. Time to go home.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Nice work.
And if you'd like